The title hung in the air, a cruel whispered promise. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind drenched in the gray monotony of a mid-September drizzle. Alara stared at her phone screen, the words from her best friend, Chloe, glowing like a dare. Tell him you want a divorce and he'll beg. Trust me. Men are predictable. It's the only language they understand. Alara tucked a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear, her gaze drifting from the phone to the kitchen window. Leo was in the backyard, a dark silhouette against the encroaching dusk, meticulously raking the first fallen leaves into a neat pile. His movements were methodical, quiet, like everything he did. For 10 years that quiet had felt like peace. Now it felt like an absence. The silence in their marriage hadn't arrived with a bang, but had seeped in like the damp cold through the old window frames of their Victorian house. It started with the little things. He stopped noticing her new haircuts. She stopped asking about his day, knowing the answer would be a perfunctory, "Fine. You?" Their conversations became a series of well-rehearsed logistical transactions. Who's picking up the dry cleaning? Did you pay the electric bill? What should we do for your mother's birthday? Chloe's message was a splash of cold water. It was cynical, manipulative, and utterly unlike the earnest, romantic girl Alara had been in her 20s. But that girl was tired of feeling like a ghost in her own marriage. Tired of the predictability, the comfortable indifference that had calcified into a prison. She wanted a reaction. She wanted a crack in the placid surface of Leo's world. She wanted him to see her, even if it was through the jagged lens of shock and fear. The lie formed in her mind, not as a weapon, but as a desperate diagnostic tool, a way to shock a flatlining patient back to life. She wouldn't actually mean it. It was a test, a terrible high-stakes test, to see if there was anything left to save. Leo came in, stamping his feet on the mat and shrugging off his waxed jacket. He smelled of damp earth and cool air, a scent she once found grounding. He poured himself a glass of water, his back to her. The timer in Alara's head counted down. "Leo," she said, her voice thinner than she intended. He turned, the glass halfway to his lips. "Yeah? We need to talk." The phrase, the universal dread noun, a flicker of something wariness, annoyance, crossed his face before settling back into his default expression of mild attentiveness. He put the glass down, pulled out a kitchen chair and sat. "Okay, shoot." Like she was about to fire off a mundane question about weekend plans. The casualness of it, the sheer predictability of his response, was the final push. It was the proof she didn't know she needed that the silence was his preference, not a shared space. "I want a divorce." The words landed in the sterile kitchen, as stark and cold as the LED light from the fridge. The air in the room seemed to compress. For a long, agonizing second, nothing happened. Leo just stared at her, his head tilted slightly as if he was trying to decipher a complex piece of abstract art. Then, the world tilted on its axis. He didn't beg. Chloe was wrong. There was no dramatic drop to his knees, no tears, no frantic promises to change. Instead, a profound stillness settled over him, the kind of stillness that precedes a cataclysm. His face, which she had memorized in sleep, in laughter, in quiet contemplation, became an unreadable mask. And then, the mask cracked. It wasn't the crack she wanted. It wasn't a fissure of vulnerability, but a chasm of something ancient and terrifying. A deep, guttural sound escaped his throat, not a sob, but a groan of pure, unadulterated pain. His hand, which had been resting on the table, clenched into a fist, the knuckles white. He looked down at his own hand as if it belonged to a stranger, then back at her. When he spoke, his voice was a ragged whisper, stripped of all its usual calm. "No." It was the most honest word he had spoken to her in years. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile floor with a sound like a scream. He didn't come to her. He walked past her, towards the stairs, his movements jerky and uncoordinated, a stark contrast to his usual measured grace. He took the stairs 2 at a time, and a moment later she heard the bedroom door close. Not a slam, a click. A soft, definitive, and terrifying click. Alara sat frozen at the kitchen table, the echo of his "no" ringing in her ears. This wasn't the script. He was supposed to fight, to promise, to pursue. He was supposed to make her feel wanted. Instead, he had retreated into a silence far deeper and more frightening than the one they had shared. This silence was filled with the ghost of a scream. The hours that followed were the longest of her life. She heard no movement from upstairs. She finally crept up to the guest room and lay on the bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. The house, once their shared project, their haven, felt like a hollow shell. Morning came, gray and unforgiving. She descended the stairs, her heart hammering against her ribs. She found him in the kitchen, sitting in the same chair, in the same clothes. He hadn't slept. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed, but the raw emotion from the night before was gone, replaced by a chilling, bureaucratic calm. On the table in front of him were 3 neat piles: her passport, her birth certificate, a check. He slid the check towards her. It was for a staggering amount. Half of everything they owned, and then some. It was more than generous. He was clinical. "I've already called Mark," he said, referring to his lawyer and longtime friend. His voice was flat, devoid of inflection. "He'll draw up the papers. You can have the house, of course. It makes sense. I'll find an apartment in the city. We'll need to figure out the logistics of the cars, the joint accounts. I've noted everything down." He pushed a sheet of paper towards her. It was a bullet-pointed list. House, cars, investments, savings, furnishings, pet, Basil the cat. Each item had a proposed solution, written in his neat, precise handwriting. It was the most comprehensive and thoughtful document he had produced for their marriage in half a decade. Alara stared at the check, the list, the documents. This was worse than begging. This was capitulation. This was him treating the dissolution of their 10-year marriage with the same emotionless efficiency he would use to dissolve a business partnership. He wasn't fighting for her. He was facilitating her departure. He was making it easy for her to leave. "Leo, wait," she stammered, the lie she had set in motion, now a runaway train she couldn't stop. I just... He looked at her then, and his eyes were empty. Not angry, not sad. Just empty. Like someone had snuffed out a candle inside him. "You said what you said, Alara, and it's not a surprise. It's not. I've been waiting for it. For years, I think. I didn't want to be the one to say it first." He gave a small, broken shrug. "So, here we are." He stood up. "I'll be at my office if you need anything. Mark will be in touch." And then he was gone, the front door closing with another soft, devastating click. The days that followed were a blur of surreal misery. True to his word, Leo moved into a sterile corporate apartment within the week. The divorce papers arrived, thick and official. His lawyer, Mark, was courteous and efficient. Her own lawyer, a recommendation from Chloe, kept assuring her she'd gotten a fantastic deal. Chloe, for her part, was thrilled. "See? I told you." He crumbled. "You hold all the cards now. Don't you feel powerful?" Powerful? Alara felt like she was dissolving. She walked through the empty, too quiet house, touching Leo's books left on the shelf, his mug still in the cabinet, the indentation of his head on the pillow in their bedroom which she now couldn't bear to sleep in. Basil, their cat, wandered from room to room, meowing plaintively, searching for his other human. The victory Chloe spoke of was a mirage. The silence she had once resented now yawned into a deafening, all-consuming void. She realized, with a sickening lurch, that the quiet in their marriage hadn't been an absence of feeling. It had been the sound of 2 people tiptoeing around a chasm, terrified of falling in. And now she had just pushed them both over the edge. A month later, the decree absolute arrived. It was done. Legally, irrevocably done. She tried to move on. She went on a date set up by Chloe with a man who talked loudly about his sports car and his ex-wife's crazy. She felt nothing but a profound, bone-deep weariness. She missed Leo, not the ghost she had been living with, but the real Leo, the one who would make her tea when she was sad, who knew exactly how she liked her toast, who would hold her in the dark without saying a word. Her mother called, her voice laced with gentle confusion. "Sweetheart, I ran into Leo at the hardware store yesterday. He looked thin. He asked how you were. He looked so sad, Alara. Are you sure this is what you both wanted?" The question burrowed under her skin. Was it what she wanted? She had wanted a reaction. She had wanted a fight. She had gotten an abyss. She started driving past his office, then past his apartment building. She told herself it was a coincidence. Then, one rainy Tuesday evening, a mirror of the night it all began, she found herself parked outside his building, her hands gripping the steering wheel. She saw him emerge from the glass doors, hunched against the rain, a takeout bag in his hand. He looked exactly as her mother had described, thin, diminished, his shoulders curved inward as if carrying an immense weight. He didn't look at her car. He just walked slowly down the street and disappeared into the entrance of his building. A sob caught in her throat. This was the man she loved. This was the man she had tried to wake up with a lie, and in doing so had plunged into a coma. The next day she did something desperate. She went to see Mark, his lawyer and friend. She sat in his plush office, a stranger in her own life, and asked the question that had been eating her alive. "Mark, I need you to tell me the truth. When Leo came to you, what did he say, exactly?" Mark leaned back in his chair, studying her for a long moment. His initial professional courtesy was tempered with a flicker of something else, pity maybe, or reproach. "You want the unvarnished version, Elara?" he asked. She nodded, her throat tight. Mark sighed. He didn't come in here like a man ending a marriage. He came in like a man who'd just been told his world was ending. He sat in that very chair where you are now. He didn't talk about assets or logistics at first. He just stared at the wall. Then he said, "She finally said it. I always knew she would. I'm not good with words, Mark. I'm not good at showing her. I thought if I just kept everything steady, kept the ship afloat, gave her a good life, it would be enough. I thought quiet was content. I was wrong, and now it's too late." Mark paused, letting the words sink in. He didn't fight it because he thought he'd lost the right. He thought your request for a divorce wasn't a surprise attack, but the final logical conclusion to years of his own failure. He saw it as a mercy. He gave you everything because he felt he owed you everything, and he had nothing left to give. He wasn't being cold, Elara. He was being broken. The tears Elara had been holding back for a month finally spilled over, hot, silent, and unstoppable. She hadn't tested him. She had confirmed his deepest, most secret fear, that he wasn't enough. Her lie hadn't been a diagnostic tool. It had been a death sentence for his hope. She drove straight to his apartment. She didn't call, didn't text. She just stood outside his door, shivering in the cold, and knocked. The door opened. Leo stood there, in a faded college t-shirt and sweatpants. He looked even worse up close. His eyes were hollow, his face gaunt. He stared at her, uncomprehending. "Elara? What's wrong? Is it Basil? Are you okay?" "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm not okay, and neither are you. Leo, I lied." He flinched as if she'd struck him. "What? That night? When I said I wanted a divorce? I didn't mean it. I was so lost. I felt invisible. Chloe said if I said it, you'd fight for me. You'd beg. You'd finally see me. It was a stupid, cruel, childish test, and instead of failing it, you passed it in the most heartbreaking way possible. You let me go because you thought it was what I needed. You loved me enough to set me free." She was sobbing now, the words tumbling out in a messy, desperate rush. "I don't want the house. I don't want the money. I don't want any of it. I just want you. I want the quiet. I want your quiet. Because I finally understand it. It wasn't indifference. It was your way of holding everything together. It was your love language. And I was too stupid and too busy listening to my foolish friend to learn how to read it." Leo stood frozen in the doorway, his face a battlefield of shock, pain, and a dawning fragile hope. He didn't speak. He just opened his arms. Elara collapsed into them, burying her face in his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of him-clean laundry, a hint of coffee, and just him. His arms closed around her, tight and strong, and for the first time in months the silence wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, full of regret, full of a love that had been bruised and battered, but not broken. He held her for a long time right there in the doorway, until her sobs subsided into shaky hiccups. Finally, he pulled back just enough to look at her, his own eyes wet. "It wasn't all your fault," he said, his voice rough. "You were right to feel invisible. I got comfortable. I stopped trying. I thought 'I love you' was implied in every paid bill and fixed faucet. I forgot that you needed to hear it. You needed to feel it." "We both forgot," she whispered. "So what do we do now?" he asked, the question hanging between them, heavy with the wreckage of the past months and the terrifying, beautiful possibility of a future. Alara looked at him, this quiet, steady man who had loved her so deeply and so silently, that he had let her go rather than trap her in a marriage he thought she didn't want. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the stubble, the warmth of his skin. "We learn," she said. "We learn to speak each other's language. You learn to say the words, and I learn to listen to the silence. We start over. From here. Right now." He leaned his forehead against hers. A single tear escaped and traced a path down his cheek, and she caught it with her thumb. It was the most precious thing he had ever given her. A visible crack in his quiet. A tear, and it meant more than any dramatic plea ever could. He hadn't begged when she asked for a divorce, but in his quiet surrender, in his broken compliance, he had begged more eloquently than any words ever could. He had begged for her happiness, even at the expense of his own. And now, standing in the sterile hallway of his temporary home, she finally heard it. She finally understood, and it was time to go home,